Good evening. Good evening. Welcome to the Orange County Historical Society. Thank you all for coming tonight. My name's Chris Jepson. I'm the current president of the society. So I'm going to start with a few announcements this evening. First of all, after many years at the Heritage Museum of Orange County, the Society is now looking for a new home for our archives, library, and office. Yeah, exactly. We need at least 1,000 square feet, HVAC, adequate parking, weekend access, strong floors, because nothing's heavier than archival paper. And low rent, of course, in Orange County. In a perfect world, it would be centrally located, not way out on the fringes of Orange County, and have relatively good freeway access. We are not opposed to sharing space with another organization, and so if you have suggestions or available space, please let me know. You can come talk to me. Or shoot me an email or a text. So, with that said, I've also been asked to mention a couple upcoming events put together by other organizations. One, the history room at the Orange Public Library, in conjunction with Orange Community Historical Society, is holding what they call Attics to Archives. And this will be on Saturday, March 29th from 10 to 2 at the library in their community room. And essentially, well, I'll read it. It says it's time for a spring cleaning as you give your memories to Orange of see, I'm doing a great job. As you give your memories of the city of Orange a new permanent home in the History Center. Join the Orange Public Library and History Center community room to transfer your pieces of Orange from your home to our archives. So if you have photos, ephemera, memorabilia, what have you, you can either bring it and donate it, or they will scan it for you on site on the day of the event. So, and again, that's Saturday, March 29th from 10 to 2. And if you, so there is that, and you can go to historicalorange.org. And again, that is all for City of Orange historical material, not necessarily the whole county of Orange. They're very specific over there, as they should be. Also, I wanted to mention, I'm just going to pull this off my phone, the Orange County Archives Bazaar is going to be this Sunday, March 16th, at the Great Park, Hangar 244 over in Irvine. And this is always a great event. It's all the different, or an awful lot of the different historical organizations, archives, and what have you from throughout the county get together, present their materials, share information, answer questions. It's a way to find out a lot about organizations and resources you may not know about already, and be able to ask questions. And it's a good place for a lot of people who are interested in local history and doing research to have some aha moments. So, and meet some of the people they should be meeting. So I think I'm going to be there representing the Orange County Archives, my day job, and the Orange County Historical Society, I believe, will also have a booth there that day. So anyway, come on down for that. So, wanted to go a quick rundown of our upcoming events for the Orange County Historical Society. Next month, on April 10th, historian, Huntington Beach City Archivist, and former OCHS board member Kathy Shea will discuss Huntington Beach during World War I and the historic stories of some of our heroic citizens who served in the war from that city. On May 8th, I've been talked into giving a talk, and so I'll be here talking about the shooting of Frank Wilson by Alfred Wolff at San Juan by the Sea, which is a defunct railroad town that's now in what's now basically Capistrano Beach, part of Dana Point. Anyway, this all takes place in 1888. It's a great slice of the Old West. It's a good chance to talk about one of our ghost towns that just fully disappeared, and to talk about the railroad boom and how that impacted Orange County, and the story of a murderer being brought to justice. So that will be in May. Our June meeting is, of course, our annual dinner. And this year, our annual dinner will be held at the Alta Vista Country Club in Placentia. Historian and Disney Imagineer Christopher Merritt, who you'll remember from our recent Knott's Berry Tales program we had here, will speak on the subject of Designing Disneyland, the imagination of Mark Davis. The evening will include a delightful buffet dinner and our always popular silent auction. Flyers are included in the latest issue of the Courier and are also available on the back table. So if you're interested in attending the annual dinner, you'll have to sign up for that, and you can do that with the flyer. So help yourself to one of those. All right. So with that, I will like to introduce our speaker. I met tonight's speaker in, again, my day job at the Orange County Archives, and I found that he and his associates were very enthusiastic in their research into historic properties. And he was clearly looking forward to this becoming an ongoing project, not just a one-off. And I really appreciated that. It's music to my ears when somebody takes us seriously and wants to stick with it. Hunter Fuentes works in the real estate industry for Zillow and is a resident of Laguna Beach. He developed a passion for the coastal town and its historic housing many years ago and has created a website called Historic Laguna. The website celebrates the architects and architecture that help give the city its distinctive charm. With that, Hunter?
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it. Good evening. Again, my name is Hunter Fuentes. I'm a resident of Laguna Beach, a licensed real estate agent. Yes, I work for Zillow, and I'd like to call myself an amateur architectural historian, as I'm sure we all would like to. I co-author with John Stordahl a monthly column called This Is Where We Live for the Laguna Beach Independent, a local newspaper that we've got. This column focuses on issues relating to historic architecture and preservation and just fun stories about Laguna Beach. I also, like Chris mentioned, created a website called Historic Laguna. I hope that it'll grow into a resource to help property owners with preservation and historians with their own research as well. Laguna is a special place, and its residents are known for their devotion to the city. The term Lagunatics did not come out of thin air. I chose the title of this evening's presentation, Paradise Found, because that's what many of us that live in Laguna consider our town, our own slice of heaven on earth. I've been working on a collaborative research project with my good friends, Brad Engeland and John Stordahl, for the past 3 years. The focus of this endeavor is to amass a documented record of the works of the early architects who helped build the public and private structures of Laguna Beach. Surprisingly, this sort of catalog has never been compiled by the city. The portfolios we're amassing include the work of the 3 architects I'd like to examine this evening. To acquire the information needed to compile these architectural records, we draw on several different sources. One of the most helpful has been the digital archives of the Orange County Public Library System. The library has digitized local newspapers from every city in the county. The South Coast News and Laguna Beach Life have been major sources of information about the city, and I really can't stress that enough. We've also come to rely on the Long Beach Public Library digital archives. We're able to access newspapers from all over California through their online system. And this is especially helpful because it includes the Orange County Register archive, which ironically is not available in the Orange County Library system, but it is what it is. We also make extensive use of other sources, including vintage phone directories, Ancestry.com, and books written by local authors like Jane Jams. Susan Berriman, the county archivist, has been incredibly helpful matching owners with specific addresses. So big shout out to Susan, constantly emailing her. We have also conducted oral interviews with people connected to Laguna and its history, obviously. So for this evening's presentation, we've drawn on those interviews with the grandchildren of 2 of the subject architects. Images of Laguna Beach in the early 1900s looks more like a frontier town in the Wild West than the coastal resort we think of today. The completion of Coast Highway in 1926 and the paving of the Canyon Road around that same time changed everything. The town's population swelled from fewer than 400 in 1920 to nearly 6,700 in 1950. That rapid expansion triggered a construction boom. I'd like to present the work of 3 architects who completed significant projects in the city during this time. Those architects are Jean Louis Egasse, Aubrey St, and Manfred DeAhna. So I'll first start with Jean Louis Egasse. His career in Laguna began the earliest, was the most distinctive in style, and he left the smallest portfolio of work. He was born in Paris in June 1886, lost his mother at age 11, and his father just 4 years later. So by age 15, he was really just on his own. An uncle sent him to Spain for a couple years to complete his education, and from there, he became fluent in the language. Sometime in the first decade in the last century, he moved to Britain. He lived and studied at the Cloisters, an avant-garde school run by a Quaker spinster named Annie Jane Lawrence. The curriculum was focused on the humanities, and particularly psychology. And at the Cloisters, Jean Louis was also first introduced to the philosophy of theosophy and to the design principles of the arts and crafts movement. The school fit his own developing eccentric style. In Britain, he met and married an English girl named Jessie Reed, whose family did not approve of the marriage. The young couple immigrated to the United States in March 1912 and were living in Los Angeles by early the next year. They had 2 children, a daughter named Jeannie and a son named Jan, both born in LA County. I've not been able to substantiate any formal architectural training. In June 1917, he registered for the military draft. On his draft card, he was described as medium in height and weight with brown hair and brown eyes. He listed his occupation as engineer in architecture. It was very common at this time for architects to learn their craft as apprentices, working under the masters of the profession. I've not been able to reconstruct his working career, but he clearly honed a talent for unique design. The earliest project ascribed to Egasse is a home he designed for Albert and Constance Brash at 2327 Hill Street in Eagle Rock. The home was described as having the touch of the Norman lines, such as were left by the descendants of Vikings. Curves and arches of Roman windows, although not symmetrical, are all geometrically related. The Brash home has all of the elements that we see in his future projects. To call the style Norman is too literal. Its whimsical characteristics are more storybook. Steve Carney described that style in a Los Angeles Times piece in 2018 as crooked timbers, cockeyed chimneys, and details that range from medieval to mirthful. Storybook-style houses seem less like actual homes than Hollywood sets. Carney cited Egasse as an expert in the storybook style. The house was rented by Ben Affleck and Matt Damon from September 1993 to March 1994 while they drafted the screenplay for Good Will Hunting. In 1923, the Egasse family moved to Laguna Beach. The Anaheim Daily Herald, reporting on this relocation on July 12th of that year, described Egasse as a designer, an expert architectural and landscape engineer. His first Laguna project was that same year, the Ark, at 2191 Ocean Way. This one-of-a-kind home sits on the bluffs overlooking Woods Cove. It reminds me of the Swiss Family Robinson treehouse at Disneyland, which is perfectly fitting for tonight. Something magical cobbled together from the wreckage of a ship. The home was built for the Utley family of Pasadena. It was later sold to the Fitzgerald family in 1936. They owned the property for 65 years. This is a wonderfully eccentric home with all of the fantasy touches of the storybook style. The house is designed to feel like an old sailing vessel heading out to the Western Sea. A ship's prow forms part of the deck, and a ship's wheel faces the ocean. There are rope grips in place of stair handrails, and woven rope to fill out deck rails, portholes, and stained glass add to the feeling of stepping back in time. So, the Egasse style was obviously not tailored to the mass market. In 1920s Southern California, variations of Spanish colonial style came to dominate residential, commercial, and civic architecture. The Egasse client needed to embrace his vision. Fortunately, the Egasse aesthetic clicked with the members of the Yarhouse family. He designed 2 commercial buildings in downtown Laguna for the family. In 1923, he designed the stunning Laguna Beach Lumber Company building for Joe Yarhouse. A few years later, he designed the South Coast News building just up the block for Joe's father, Elmer Yarhouse. The lumber company building, known as the Lumber Yard, for more than half a century, served as the office and sales floor of a working business. The sounds of buzzsaws and forklifts filled the building. The main structure anchors the corner of Forest and 3rd Street, just across from the downtown fire station. The building is a work of art. Shake roof undulates like waves on the ocean. The remarkable brickwork, especially the impressive chimney, and the asymmetrical windows only accentuate that style of fantasy. Lit up at night, it kind of reminds me of a Thomas Kinkade painting. And I mean that in the best way. This is quintessential storybook. Joe Yarhouse was a no-nonsense businessman. What could possibly have attracted him to such an eclectic style for so utilitarian a purpose? The answer is probably his life experiences. He served in Company C, 33rd Engineers in France, during the First World War. Like many veterans of that conflict, he returned home with an affinity for French architecture. That common French bond between Yarhouse and Egasse united these men with purpose. The building survives today as a popular restaurant named appropriately Lumberyard. And they have the best veggie burger. Jean Louis Egasse planned to put down roots in Laguna Beach. He was active in the local art community, designed a new stage for the local theater company, taught the sport of fencing, met with fellow Francophiles and Theosophists, and even practiced yoga on the beach. A true Lagunan. In 1926, he designed a home for his family on North Coast Highway. This personal residence is every bit as eccentric as the artist who crafted it. It has all the Egasse touches: timber beams, stucco, intricate brickwork, asymmetrical windows, a wavy shake roof, turrets, and heavy formidable doors. Egasse instructed the carpenters helping him build his home not to use levels, because that's how homes were constructed in Normandy. Egasse physically worked on the property. He built both a home for his family and an office for himself. In the 1920s, the Egasse home would have been one of the most distinctive landmarks in town. The house would have truly looked like a castle, towering over the highway. A later owner named Walter Freitag hired a contractor named Sandy Pringle to design and construct a stunning brick wall to separate the house from the frantic world around it. That world, Coast Highway. That wall is an eclectic mixture of nonlinear brick and unexpected materials such as horseshoe, lightning rod, hinges, and a rusted disc from a telescope. They all collectively form a wonderful tribute to the aesthetic of Egasse. Today, the home is owned by George and Debbie Hoyos. They were kind enough to give me a tour of their wonderful property. They have christened their home the Crescent Bay Castle, and I think Egasse would like that. In summation, Jean Louis Egasse was a talented designer with a unique voice. He left a small portfolio of work, 3 homes in Los Angeles County, a couple commercial buildings, and a few residences in Laguna Beach. The Depression hit him hard. Commissions dried up and debts mounted. In the early 1930s, his marriage fell apart. According to his granddaughter Jeannie, his wife and daughter moved back to Britain. His son Jan wound up living with in Laguna with Kurt and Bessie Perrin, who grew into his surrogate parents. As for Jean Louis Egasse, by the early 1930s, he has simply disappeared. A December 1942 article referred to Jean Louis Egasse as an architect who had long since passed away. In fact, Egasse was actually alive and well, remarried and living in Santa Barbara. He had needed to escape from the burden of debt in order to get a fresh start. He even changed his name, keeping his initials JLE, but adding DeArgestel as a surname. He lived a quiet life in Santa Barbara and died there in August 1965. His designs live on. It is their singular charm that have made Egasse structures so loved and treasured. Next, I'd like to take a look at the career of Aubrey St. Clair. Of the early Laguna architects, he is the first among equals. He designed the core of the city's civic center, including the Water District building, the downtown fire station, and the City Hall. His Laguna portfolio includes dozens of commercial, church, and residential projects. His prolific career spanned 5 decades and reflects the evolution of architectural tastes during that span of time. And in the interest of full disclosure, I must say that I live on the property of a historic St. Clair designed home, so I might have a bit of bias towards his work. None of the 3 architects that we're looking at this evening were Laguna natives, but St. Clair comes the closest. He was visiting the city with his parents by his mid-teens and just came along and checked everything out. I think he liked what he saw. Aubrey Fleetwood St. Clair was as near to Laguna Beach royalty as one could get. He was born on July 18, 1889, in Malden, Massachusetts. His parents were Norman and Anne Elizabeth St. Clair. He was the oldest of 4 brothers. Both of his parents were born in Britain. His father, Norman St. Clair, was artistic by nature. He was trained in architecture, illustration, and painting. Norman St. Clair is considered one of the founders of the artist community in Laguna Beach. He was painting there as early as 1904. Aubrey grew up in Pasadena. He graduated from Pasadena High School in the class of 1907. Between 1909 and 1912, he apprenticed in the offices of the legendary Pasadena firm Green & Green and with the prolific architect Reginald Johnson. Like Jean Louis Egasse, the death of his father in 1912 had a profound impact on the trajectory of Aubrey's life. Norman St. Clair died of tuberculosis at age 47. He left a widow and 4 young sons. Aubrey was the oldest at age 22, and as such, had become the head of the family. He left for an extended trip to England and France a few weeks after his father's death. While in Europe, Aubrey completed numerous sketches of European architecture and had an opportunity to visit his British relatives. He completed courses at Battersea Polytechnic Institute, now the University of Surrey. He returned home at the end of 1912, and the following summer married Eudora Dolly Graham. The young couple started their married life in Pasadena. Between 1916 and 1924, 4 children were born. Aubrey continued to hone his architectural skills and knowledge. He worked as an apprentice draftsman for the Irving Gill firm and the Water and Engineering Department of the City of Pasadena. When the United States first joined the First World War in April 1917, St. Clair registered for the draft. His selective service registration card describes him as tall and slender with brown hair and gray eyes. As both a husband and a father, he was deemed exempt from being called into active duty. He spent the war years working with the Hammond Lumber Company in Samoa, California. He returned to Pasadena following the end of the war, and over the next decade worked for such prominent firms as Wallace Neff and Marston and Maybury. The first commission credited to Aubrey St. Clair is the 1924 Morris Jones residence at 1250 North Holliston in Pasadena. It is a striking example of the English style he preferred. One of our favorite discoveries over the course of our research was correcting a newspaper typo. We had found a June 18th, 1928 article in the Pasadena Evening Post that credited the Adrian C. Stanton home at 2235 Ridgeway Road in San Marino to St. Clair. We even took a field trip up to San Marino to check out the residence. It's a beautiful Spanish home. Working with Krista Lakin at the San Marino Historical Society, we determined the newspaper address was one digit off. The real location of the St. Clair residence is 2335, not 2235 Ridgeway Road. Another beautiful English-style residence. So, history corrected. Aubrey's mother, Anne, was spending more and more time in Laguna Beach around this time. Aubrey and his family visited the town regularly. He also began to receive design commissions in the city. The first project in Laguna Beach that is credited to Aubrey was an oceanfront restaurant called Café Las Ondas. It was built in 1927. This was followed by several more important local commissions. In 1935, Aubrey St. Clair and his family settled permanently in Laguna Beach. St. Clair worked closely with the local builder, Sam Smith. In 1936, Aubrey designed the Builders Guild, and Smith built it. The idea was to create a one-stop destination for clients. Smith Construction, Stover Electric, Boulevard Sheet Metal, Laguna Iron Works, and St. Clair's architecture office all shared the same building. Aubrey's office was on the second floor with windows facing the hills, the other windows facing the ocean. Aubrey St. Clair designed the three most important civic structures in Laguna Beach: the Water District headquarters, the first main fire station, and the City Hall. The first two were done in the late 1920s to early 1930s, the latter in the early 1950s. The Water District building was completed in the fall of 1929. Laguna Beach had passed a $600,000 water bond in January 1926. It had passed unanimously by a vote of 437 to 0. That vote got nationwide attention and raised some eyebrows. But it did reflect the consensus that water was essential to the city's future growth. It was decided that the Water District was worthy of an impressive headquarters. The Spanish colonial style had been embraced all over the Southland, especially in the years right after the Great Santa Barbara earthquake of 1925. Aubrey St. Clair designed accordingly. The prominent local contracting firm of Ropp and Mackey built St. Clair's design. The building was completed in October 1929, just weeks before the stock market collapse that triggered the onset of the Great Depression. According to a September 1929 article in the Santa Ana Register, St. Clair designed the building to give much the appearance of a residence: a sunken courtyard, lawn covered, a cobblestone fountain, and pool for goldfish. A small arbor, trees, shrubs, and flowers enhance the setting. Inside, a massive fireplace, large windows, and a beamed ceiling give a home-like atmosphere. The Water District Board met in the large room on the second floor. Most city government functions, including council meetings, were held in this building for the next couple decades. The beautiful courtyard is still a favorite spot for weddings. Aubrey St. Clair also completed dozens of important commercial structures in the city, including 2 locations for Laguna Federal Savings and Loan. This important local institution was created by Andy Hall in 1935 and managed to survive and even thrive during the late years of the Depression and through the Second World War. In 1945, just as the war ended, Hall commissioned St. Clair to design a substantial main branch at 222 Ocean Avenue in downtown Laguna. The motto of the business was, "We're local and we love it." St. Clair wanted to capture that philosophy in a building that was both welcoming and impressive. He again embraced a Spanish colonial motif for the structure. The impressive lobby has hand-hewn beams, distinctive corbels, and tile floors. The second floor, accessed by the outdoor stair, housed the corporate boardroom. This setup is very similar to the Water District building. Andy Hall wanted customers to feel at home when they visited to do their banking. To accomplish this homey atmosphere, St. Clair incorporated a large open-air courtyard. It was filled with flowers and centered on an outdoor fountain and pool. On the fountain wall is a distinctive mural. Children were welcome to play in the courtyard while their parents banked. This beautiful building is also one of the most successful restoration projects in our city's history. The building fell into disrepair and suffered several poorly conceived remodels. The facade was significantly altered, the courtyard was completely enclosed, and the wall mural was covered over in drywall, entombed and forgotten. In 2013, new owners undertook a restoration of the building for use as a restaurant. The courtyard was opened up again, and the original facade and fountain were restored. During that work, the long-hidden mural was uncovered and once again holds pride of place in that beautiful space. Andy Hall, the founder of Laguna Federal, died suddenly in 1957. The board of directors then decided to promote his longtime protege, Lorna Mills, to the presidency. She was the first American woman to lead a savings and loan. She was a bright, talented, and strong-willed woman. She had worked at Laguna Federal since 1935 and started there just out of high school. She worked her way up from clerk to teller to administrator to president. In 1960, she decided that Laguna Federal had outgrown its 1945 St. Clair building and needed a much larger structure. It was built just up the block at 260 Ocean Avenue. She had worked with St. Clair when he had designed the original headquarters and had helped arrange financing for many St. Clair projects through the years. He was commissioned to design a very unique building with a projected cost of $700,000. By the 1950s, he was working with fellow Laguna architect Wilfred B. Verity. The pair had collaborated on City Hall. The two men shared the commission, but in truth, you're looking at the vision of a strong-willed woman, Lorna Mills. She loved New Orleans. She requested the pair of architects design a new bank building that reflected the spirit of the Big Easy. The resulting structure looks absolutely like nothing else in St. Clair's portfolio, and is perhaps more a reflection of the old maxim that the customer is always right. St. Clair was proficient in so many styles. His personal favorite was English Tudor, but he mastered Spanish Colonial, Mission, Monterey, Board and Bat, Norman, and he even designed an impressive streamlined modern home in Corona del Mar. But this French colonial was like nothing else in his portfolio. The unique three-story octagonal brick building with New Orleans, I should say Nolans style wrought iron open balconies is meant to evoke the French Quarter. You walk into a striking three-level circular rotunda. The second and third floors are open to the ground floor, making the building seem even larger than it is. The architects designed a dramatic floating spiral staircase that began at a fountain and a pool in the lobby. For decades, the walls of the second and third stories provided gallery space for local artists. I think that's reflective of the motto, "We're local and we love it." This was the last commission in Aubrey St. Clair's long and storied career. Finally, I'd like to take a look at the most famous residential project completed by Aubrey in Laguna Beach. It's known locally as the Betty Davis House because the movie star owned the home for a couple years in the late 1940s. But it was built for Charles Prisk in 1929. The Prisk family were prominent in the newspaper business. The family owned 2 papers in Pasadena, 2 in Long Beach, and for several years, the local South Coast News. Prisk commissioned Aubrey to design a French Norman-style residence perched on the cliffs overlooking the ocean at Woods Cove to serve as his summer vacation home. The turret gives away that French influence. The construction costs were estimated to be $25,000, making it one of the most expensive homes built that year. At almost 5,500 square feet, this is the largest home Aubrey designed in Laguna Beach. The house has 3 levels, visible on the oceanside elevation. You enter through a private courtyard. Both the main house and the guest house are accessible from that courtyard. The living room has stunning wood-beamed chapel ceiling. There are 6 bedrooms, 8 bathrooms, and an unheard of 4-car garage. Not bad for a summer getaway. Charles Prisk died in 1945. The property was then purchased by actress Bette Davis in 1947. She had an affection for Laguna and had spent a long time in the city, as did her mother and her sister. In 1945, she married William Grant Sherry, an artist recently discharged from the Navy. He'd been living in an apartment in the Villa Rockledge, one of Laguna's eccentric masterpieces. They lived together in the Prisk Davis home for less than 2 years, but that period of ownership is what sealed the property's reputation and is the reason it is Aubrey's most notable residential project in Laguna. Between 1927 and 1961, Aubrey St. Clair designed civic buildings, commercial structures, churches, and dozens of homes in Laguna Beach. No architect has left as significant an impact on the city. His work spanned a wide array of styles. He evolved with the times and to the demands of his clients. Several of his designs were featured in Architectural Digest. He and his wife raised their children in a small cottage on Jasmine Street. Until her death in 1946, his mother lived next door. His brothers Malcolm, Bernard, and Eric all lived in the city or maintained vacation homes there. 4 generations called Laguna home. His grandchildren have been very helpful in our effort to catalog his projects. They remember him as a kind and humble man who took great pride in his work and even greater pride in his family. Aubrey St. Clair died in Laguna Beach in May 1968. I just want to quickly point out too, that sign is still outside of the Jasmine residence. If you drive by it, you can take a look and see that same sign. It's pretty cool. You can barely see it behind some foliage there, but as Brad, John, and I have researched this project chronicling the works of Laguna's early architects over the past 3 years, we've been impressed by each, but I think we have a soft spot for the next subject, Manfred DeAhna. He was born on Christmas Day, 1897, in Seguin, Texas, near San Antonio. His father, Edward, would become a successful printer and newspaperman, working for the Christian Science Monitor and the San Francisco Chronicle. The family had settled in Laguna by the early 1920s. From 1922 to 1924, his father, Edward DeAhna, owned Laguna's earliest paper, the Laguna Beach Life. Edward became a respected figure in early Laguna and even served as a justice of the peace. His mother, Alice, was from an old and prominent Southern family. She was a leader in Laguna Beach society and hosted an annual Dixie Day party that was a celebration of her heritage and one of the town's most popular events. His parents' connections would help advance his career in the community. Unlike many of his contemporaries, Manfred was formally trained in architecture. He enrolled in the architecture program at Rice University in Houston. His studies were interrupted by the First World War. He registered for the draft, and his draft card describes him as tall, medium build, with dark hair and gray eyes. He joined the U.S. Army in June 1918 and was decommissioned 6 months later following the end of the war. He resumed his studies at Rice and graduated 2 years later. Manfred was working in Los Angeles by 1922, including a stint with the prestigious firm of Myron Hunt. He married Mary Frances Menely in June 1924. The couple had one child, a daughter named Annette, who was born in 1936. The young family had settled in Laguna Beach by the mid-1930s. He established his office in a small, whimsical building he designed at 1133 South Coast Highway that now houses Wahoo's Fish Tacos. He shared the space with Gates Burroughs, another prominent architect in the city. One of the lost jewels of Laguna Beach architecture was Hathaway Ford. The dealership had been a thriving business for several years, one of more than half a dozen automobile dealerships in the city. In 1937, Earl Hathaway commissioned Manfred DeAhna to design a far more comprehensive complex than a simple car lot. Hathaway envisioned a full-service facility, car sales showroom, service department, and gas station all in one. Like Egasse's Laguna Beach Lumber Company, DeAhna fashioned a utilitarian-purposed structure into a work of art. This was the age of the great movie palaces and elegant department stores. Why not bring that same standard of design to the automobile retail market? DeAhna admired the streamlined modern style, and this is one of two significant examples of the style that he completed in Laguna Beach in 1938. Over 800 tons of concrete were used in the construction of the structure. Modern design embraces rounded corners, flat roofs, generous curves, and aerodynamic shapes. Each of those elements are present in the completed building. The curve of the corner roofline frames the gas pumps and the service bays and is repeated in the large plate glass windows that enclose the showroom floor. Vertical lines create an artistic element to the building's exterior. The structure is crowned with a dramatic obelisk announcing the Ford brand. The building was torn down after only a few decades. A massive three-story retail structure, the only block-long building in the city, was built on the site, once graced by Hathaway Ford. It's a stark reminder of a legacy lost. As work wrapped up on Hathaway Ford, DeAhna turned his focus to the oceanfront Vista apartment building in the 500 block of South Coast Highway. Bruce Caldwell commissioned DeAhna to design a multi-tiered structure that would step down in 4 levels from the highway to the beach below. Like Hathaway Ford, steel and concrete were utilized in the construction, something relatively rare in Laguna Beach at the time. Smith Construction also built that structure. Once again, DeAhna chose streamlined modern for his style. At highway level, he designed 2 retail spaces separated by the driveway entrance to a 16-stall parking garage. More angular than conventional modern, the crisp stucco walls, horizontal deck rails, and expansive corner windows still accomplish that nautical vibe commonly associated with that style today. There were a total of 9 apartments. The units facing the highway have glass block walls that allow natural light to come in, but in a way that protects privacy for occupants. Glass block was obviously a familiar element in modern architecture. The apartments ranged from studios to 1-bedroom units. The building was all electric with the latest appliances. The units were rented furnished and for both short-term and long-term leases. The building remains today, but is in a state of advanced neglect. This is one of the ongoing issues facing Laguna Beach: how to compel commercial property owners to maintain their structures. Next, I'd like to take a look at DeAhna's most famous commission to the city. Because of the obvious appeal of Laguna's natural beauty, visitors have long flocked to the town. Hotels and camping sites were some of the first permanent structures to be constructed in the city. In fact, DeAhna designed a few motel projects in Laguna, including Laguna Terrace, the Sea Cliff Motor Hotel, and the Laguna Shores Bungalow Hotel. Restaurants were also a critical element in Laguna's hospitality industry, much like today. Smaller establishments like the White House, the Sandwich Mill, Hazel's, and Café Las Ondas all thrived in the teens, 20s, and 30s. As the town grew in reputation and population, more glamorous restaurants appeared. One of the most famous was Victor Hugo Inn, which brought destination dining to Laguna. The restaurant was established by an Italian immigrant named Hugo Elitis. Born in Rome in 1888, he arrived in New York on July 4th, 1907, an ambitious 18-year-old. He lived briefly in New York and New Orleans, but had settled in Los Angeles by 1911. He worked in that city's bustling restaurant industry for a few years before opening his own establishment on South Hill Street in 1917. He called it Victor Hugo. He liked that it was the name of the well-known author, I should say, and incorporated part of his own name as well. That first spot thrived for nearly a decade. Both the fare and the ambiance were formal French at a time when Americans associated anything continental with sophistication. Elitis served good food in a convivial setting, but the real attraction was himself. People liked him. His warmth attracted customers and inspired loyalty in his staff. He developed a strong following among the Hollywood crowd that would prove beneficial in his future endeavors. He went on to establish 2 more Victor Hugos, each more opulent than the earlier versions. In 1925, he opened a location on South Grand Avenue in downtown Los Angeles. Then, in 1934, he opened still another location in Beverly Hills. He closed that spot in 1937, citing a need to rest. In January 1939, A.I.A announced plans to open a new Victor Hugo Inn on the cliffs at Heisler Point in Laguna Beach. He commissioned Manfred DeAhna to design a more informal restaurant and bar in what was described as French Provençal style. DeAhna's plan called for a large vestibule, spacious dining room with seating for 110, a banquet room for 60 guests, and a Tyrolean-themed cocktail lounge. Each section afforded expansive views of the Pacific. The single-story structure, wood-framed with stucco, finishing, and a tile roof, added a low-slung, casual elegance to the setting. A.I.A brought in landscape designer Francois Scotti to add both hardscape and plantings to complement DeAhna's work. Scotti had supervised landscape design at the Riverside Mission Inn. The new restaurant was surrounded by formal hedges and flowers. 11 staff members, including his head chef, followed A.I.A from Los Angeles, as did numerous customers. Longtime customer and friend Betty Davis filmed a critical scene from the 1942 classic Now Voyager. In the terrace garden of the Victor Hugo Inn, you can see that's where that scene was. Hugo A.I.A sold his interest in the establishment in 1957 to the Fred Harvey chain, as in the Harvey Girls. However, the new owners kept the Victor Hugo name. In 1979, the restaurant was purchased by the El Torito Corporation. They closed the restaurant and significantly altered the exterior appearance into something more reminiscent of coastal Mexico than the French Riviera. They also rebranded the space to the name it bears still today, Las Brisas. I'll finish up this evening with one of my favorite homes in all of Laguna. I pass it almost every day when walking my golden retriever Drake out for his morning walk. The house sits in the middle of the block on Marine Drive, but something about it commands attention. Like his Laguna contemporaries, DeAhna's designs embrace several different styles. I think he probably enjoyed the modern style most of all, but like every architect and designer, he had the flexibility to embrace a client's designs and desires. This project is a good reflection of that practical flexibility. DeAhna was commissioned by Louis Canepa, a successful Los Angeles businessman, to design a vacation home for his family. It eventually became a primary residence. This house was described in a September 1950 Los Angeles Times article as a 2-story New England farmhouse, painted a rich apple red with lots of shining white trim. I think it's an accurate description. The article goes on to note that one enters the property through a prim swinging gate in a white brick wall. 75 years later, you still do. The house's exterior looks almost exactly as described in the 1950 article. The home is crowned by one of the most distinctive cupolas in all of Laguna, and we've got lots of those. It's tall, octagonal in shape, with a steeply pitched copper top crowned with a weather vane of a bird in flight. The rear elevation is perched on the cliffs overlooking Crescent Bay. From this perspective, the home has more Monterey elements. Earlier I mentioned Jane Jans and her interesting book, Naming Laguna Beach. Getting to know Jane personally has been a real pleasure. When I mentioned the Canepa residence to her, she smiled and said she knew the family. In fact, she said that her first boyfriend was Louis Canepa's son. It's these stories that bring these places to life. This was the last commission we have been able to connect to DeAhna. By the early 1950s, Manfred and his family had left Laguna. His daughter Annette finished high school in Escondido. He died in that city on August 20th, 1976. In the April 1944 edition of Architect and Engineer magazine, Sewell Smith, A.I.A., wrote that the work of Manfred DeAhna is top-notch and his fresh contemporary work full of indigenous charm. It deserves to be known far and wide. I couldn't agree more. In conclusion, I titled this presentation Paradise Found as a tribute to Laguna Beach residents' passion for our city. But I also drew inspiration from the title of John Milton's epic poem, Paradise Lost. There's some sad architectural truth to that title. So many venerable buildings in Laguna are in peril. Aubrey St. Clair's neighborhood congregational church is in danger of being torn down to make way for affordable housing. The Villa Rockledge, one of only 5 Laguna properties on the National Register of Historic Places, is in a state of advanced decay. There's a genuine fear for its future. In March 1940, Aubrey St. Clair and Manfred DeAhna were part of an association of local architects who collectively pledged to preserve the community's charm for now and for the future. These men were professional rivals, but shared a passion for good design and for Laguna Beach. We all must carry on their vision. If we're not vocal in defense of our architectural heritage, we could easily find ourselves a paradise lost. Sharing these stories is our tool to help save our past. So, seems like an appropriate time to wrap up this evening's discussion. After we conclude, I'd be happy to speak with anyone who might have any follow-up questions. I'd also like to invite you to subscribe to my website, historiclaguna.com, or you can also follow me on Instagram. On the website, you will find a link to the monthly articles that John and I publish in the Laguna Beach Independent, as well as biographies of many of the city's early architects, including the 3 men we discussed this evening. I'd like to thank Chris Jepson for his kind invitation to share my research in this forum. So thank you, Chris. I'd also like to thank Orange County Historical Society for organizing this evening's event, and Trinity Church for hosting us. Finally, I'd like to thank you all for paying attention and listening to me. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That was
Appreciate it.
Fantastic.
Thank you, Chris.
Are you up for answering
Sure,
questions?
sure.
Okay.
Why not? If
All
there's
right.
if there's any
Well,
questions.
you're not getting out of it this easy.
All right. I thought I was done. Come on. Do I have any questions? If not, no worries. I have business cards as well that just say my website. John's holding them right there. Phone number, my email. You can always reach out to me if you want a business card. I don't know if we want to pass them out or you just want to come up to me. All's good. But oh, I do see a question. Okay. Yes.
The building that was done in 1936?
Yes.
Where is that building?
Yeah, it's on the corner of, oh boy, now I'm getting, Brooks. So if you go across from Brooks Street, it's directly there. I think now what is it housed as? A hotel?
The Dirty Bird.
The Dirty Bird is the bar, yeah. And then on the other side is, yeah, it's there. The Sandpiper.
That's where I met my wife here.
Really? I love it. Laguna at its finest. That's awesome. Any other questions? Yes.
Showed a picture of the Hotel Laguna. I don't suppose either of those 3 men designed that?
Correct. They did not. I just showed it. Yeah, it is Myron Hunt.
Oh, no. The guy who did the A.I.A.
The A.I.A. Hotel in Yosemite. Under him.
There you go. The A.I.A. Hotel in Yosemite. There's so many. It gets very confusing. But Hotel Laguna, yeah, I just put it up there as a great. Yeah, it's beautiful, and yeah, it's also in a state of what's happening. But I also saw a question there. Yes.
So are you This is maybe an unfair question to ask at this moment, but are you getting politically involved in some, or in otherwise involved in the efforts to restore Villa Rockledge and also protect Bridge Hall at the NCC?
Great question. As far as involved, I've provided some photos and things during a Laguna Beach Heritage Committee tour for some efforts to keep the work of Aubrey St. Clair alive. And as far as like any affiliation or anything, I don't have anything like that as far as being with Historic Laguna or anything like that, but I support all preservation efforts and want to make sure that our buildings should stay around and should be celebrated and not just gone and forgotten, because we've lost enough. And like Fort Hathaway, boy, I wish I could have seen that with my own eyes, because it's beautiful. I could imagine that space as a restaurant today or something. It'd be such a great space. So, hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions?
Well, I'm going to ask one.
All right.
You mentioned Brad and John and their
Yes.
involvement.
Yes.
Would you like to introduce them?
Of course. Yeah. So I got my team here with me. This is Brad Engeland. I've got John Stordahl as well. Again, co-author of the monthly articles, and Bradford's our editor as well. These family members that are very incredibly helpful and near and dear to me. I've also got my parents here tonight and my brother and his girlfriend Emma. So I'm very well loved. So I'm very happy. And yeah, so we all collectively work on this together, and I work on it with you in a way. Like, it's nonstop.
A little bit.
Yeah, it's just a constant effort. Yes.
You mentioned that there was Victor Hugo's on Grand Avenue in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
When I was a little girl, I lived on Grand Avenue.
No way.
I want to know where was it?
Oh yeah, I do have the address. Off the top of my head, I'm not too sure. And you know what? One of the slides, I believe, didn't have the Victor Hugo image on there, oddly enough. So don't know how that happened, but it happens, technical difficulties. But I'd love to get back to you on that and see how close it was to where you lived. Yes?
When the Royal Hawaiian restaurant was made or built?
When the Royal Hawaiian was built?
They just redid it, I guess. I want to go and see it.
I actually don't know when it was built. That's a great question. What's it
Yeah.
really? My goodness.
If you look in books of her,
Yeah.
you can see the roof line.
Okay.
As it stands today.
Okay, I got you. Thank you, Nelda.
Is there a Laguna Conservancy that helps in, restore or purchase or have a foundation that is working on trying to save them? Or is it that the salt air, the elements of the, what they use to build, is it something that they can't restore as time goes on?
I think it's, in a way, really up to a property owner to keep it going and maintained and things like that. As far as if there's a preservation or an effort, there is the Laguna Beach Heritage Committee that's trying their best to stay involved and always stay involved with future projects and things like that. There's plenty of there's Village Laguna, there's other passionate projects around Laguna Beach that are looking to preserve those efforts. And so, yeah, there's maybe not per se one group, but there's a lot of passionate folks that are getting up every day and standing up to what they see should be,
Bulldozers.
yeah, what should be bulldozed or not. I like that. Any other questions? Yes.
Did you know Laguna Beach had an airport?
Yeah. In a way it did, yeah. Smith Cliffs.
And did you know that whole Bluebird area was for the athletes in the Olympics?
Yes, yeah, and we've got a Olympic cottage not from Los Angeles. 1932 games. That's also near a Chris Abel project. Where is that at?
158 Mountain.
158 Mountain. Yeah, that's where the cottage is. And again, that's also been a hot topic of discussion as well, the Olympic cottage. So, it's good to just stay involved. I'm at the Heritage Committee meetings every whenever it is, every first Monday or third Monday of the month, and sometimes I'm the only one in there. And so if y'all want to come and hang out with me, I wouldn't mind. But it's really nice to know what's going on in the city, and it's nice to know that we've got people that are passionate to restore our projects.
And the high school was built a long time ago in the 30s, right?
I believe so, yeah.
My grandfather worked on it.
Really? Oh, that's cool. If he has any photos, I love that you talked. Oh, well, the photos are so tough. Nelda Stone has been a wonderful resource as well and introduced us to the archives and the digital newspapers. So thank you, Nelda, as well. Yeah, well, it's a collaborative effort, definitely. Anything else? All right, I'll let y'all conclude. Thank you very much. I appreciate it again.
Thank you so much. Fantastic work.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
Keep that up, we're going to have you back.
I'll come back.
Yeah, good. Well, I will just say this. I think also Lorna Mills, I've done a little digging on her. There could be another whole program just about Lorna Mills.
Yes,
She's
sir.
an amazing person, and she was a huge advocate for Orange County history in her day. Back in the 60s, she was paying gigs to people like Mildred Yorba MacArthur and Jim Sleeper, who were writing a lot of articles and stuff for publications that Laguna Federal is putting out. So she's a big part of our story here at the Historical Society too. So
Definitely.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for coming. We'll hope to see you next month.